Okay, so hello everybody. I'd like to welcome everybody as well. Thank you very much for inviting me. This is a very relaxed setup here, very relaxed audience, so I'm very happy to be here today and tell you a little bit about what I've been doing for the past 2 years or so, year and a half maybe. And I've worked on this very intensely, and I would love to share it with you. So what I'm going to show you today is just a CMDB, connecting that to monitoring, and what's the best option. Well, I think it's a CMDB by i-doit, and then monitoring by Checkmk, otherwise I wouldn't be here today. Just going to tell you about myself. My name is Benjamin Heisig. I'm a product manager, and I also do quality assurance. And I work at i-doit, and I'm going to tell you about i-doit in just a minute. I've been working there for the past 8 years. I was a software engineer, I did IT consulting, and now I'm sort of working on all the different interfaces that we're working on, and also how we are really making sure that everything is up to par with our automated testing. So, of course, sometimes I'm also just out and about, going to conferences, being a speaker, and just, showing what we are doing. Okay, so what am I going to do over the course of the next 30 minutes or so? Well, I'm just going to give you a short introduction into IT documentation, CMDB, and also i-doit, and then I'm just going to show you how it works. I'm just going to give you a real example how this interface actually works, what it looks like, and hopefully my setup is not going to crash, because, of course, I'm definitely going to show you everything, our test environment, and hopefully it's not going to crash, like I said. But I have some backup as well in case it does. And then I'm going to show you a couple additional features. I'm going to show you one main use case and then also some additional features, and all of that is going to be summarized towards the end. I have a quick question for everybody. Who knows i-doit? Who's familiar with i-doit? Ah, okay, so quite a few of you, 3/4 probably, roughly. So that's a good amount. And who's using i-doit? Okay, not bad, not as many, but probably a third of you. Okay, it's well known apparently, but I'm still going to tell you a little bit about the main components, and that can be handled very quickly though. So what you can see here is a CMDB configuration management database, so IT documentation. This is sort of a synonym, and it's really about data, so that means we're defining what our IT infrastructure looks like, regardless of its network, if it's servers, or if it's the software that's running on it, everything around it, where is it, how is it connected, and so on. All of that is defined in this area, and of course that's also supposed to sort of represent the current situation. Of course we see that in Checkmk as well. That's really about the current situation. What's my infrastructure like? Is it healthy? Are there any problems? And so on. And also we've noticed that in order to really make it where that is as similar as possible, it's very important to make sure that we have an integration. And we have done it in the past as well, using several different tools. This morning we heard somebody ask a question, JDIS, for example, age inventory, lots of different tools that have discovery and inventory in their name. And now for a couple of years we've also focused on Checkmk in order to collect data and then also just send back data, and I'm going to show you that in a second. i-doit itself is just a database with a GUI. It doesn't do anything but that, so there's not any network scans or anything like that, or it's not trying to actually capture any data or anything like that, but it really depends on the integrations that you are building surrounding it, and usually it's just third-party applications and things like that, add-ons and so on, so things that you can flange in there. Okay, so if we now go through the theory, what is IT documentation? Nobody likes documentation. I understand that nobody in this room is really into documentation voluntarily. I know this is something that's just forced upon us. And at the end of the day, it's really not that bad if you really look at the topic in more detail, or if you really see the added benefits that you can get from it. So first of all, IT documentation, what do we think it is? Well, at the end of the day, it's something like asset management. So what kind of values do I have in my organization? For example, servers that are running somewhere, and of course also contracts that are secure and everything in case of something breaking or something like that. We have software and so on. So things that were expensive, licensing fees and so on. And of course, all of that is then configuration management as well. So that's just the old framework as well. And you can really just see all the individual values. And some people also call IT documentation discovery. So that means you just sort of discover what I really have, what I'm using. So we've heard different people here say that they have very big infrastructures as well, and you don't always know with 100% certainty which patch cable is where and how are they connected and linked and so on, which patch panels is it connected to, and what kind of components are part of it. So those are all questions that you may wonder about, and they require documentation to be answered. And of course, it's always good to have free text documentation as well, which means that at the end of the day, everything that you're interested in, for example, if you want to write a documentation document, how did I set up the server, how did I install the application or configure it, all of that needs to be documented somewhere. Lots of people use wikis or Word documents for that, and you can also do that summarized in an IT documentation, so a tool that's meant for that. But using a tool itself is not good enough. It's always very important to know that you really have to work from Monday through Friday, hopefully not on the weekends, because you're on duty, but instead it's really all about processes and things that just have to work. They have to work properly. For example, there are going to be new devices that are purchased, some are going to get rid of, consolidated, and so on. There's going to be updates on a regular basis, and all these things can be helped using documentation. It can also complete it and so on. And what that means is that you can have reports to make sure that it can be sent to the appropriate recipient, for example, management and so on, in order to really create some awareness. Okay, so what we love to do or show is all these W questions. They are really from journalism originally, and I can just show you, okay, if we have a new IT system, for example, right? IT documentation is supposed to answer all these questions, 7 questions to be precise. So if I have a new system, the question is, what have I purchased, right? That's question number 1. What is the system like? What kind of model is it? What's installed on it? And where does it say that? Which rack is it on? If it's a 19-inch device, for example, if it's a small system, which colleague actually has it on their desk and so on? And then who purchased it, who installed it, who's the administrator, also who's using it at the end of the day, right? So all of that is important. Who's the main user? It could be somebody internally, it could be a colleague that's doing it, it could be a whole department, or it could also be a customer. And then when was it purchased and installed? That's also a very important question to answer, because then we have warranties and things like that, you know, that we have to definitely keep an eye on. Then the question is, how was it installed specifically? So as I mentioned earlier, for example, you can just write a free text, what you did specifically, and then you can also just say, okay, you can just see where it is with scripts and so on. Why was it installed? That's also a very important question. That's really service management, if you think about it, and all the different business processes. For example, IT is something that's always used in order to know exactly that this system is used for all of these processes, for example, mailing system and so on, and emails can be sent out, or also an SAP system is for procurement and things like that. So how do we get all this information, or where is is all this information coming from? That's the last question. So the question is, okay, where is the information? It's on the different systems. They, of course, give you information as well. If you log into the system, for example, you can also access data. But on top of that, you can also just use tools in order to get all this information. And we're going to see that with Checkmk in just a second. So you can definitely access a lot of data. And all of that is then consolidated in i-doit, and it can then be used in many different areas.
But before going into the demo itself, I want to give you a little i-doit 101, so you don't get lost in this interface that I'm going to show you next. I hope you can read it in the back, but if not, I'm going to go through it quickly. Everything in i-doit is so-called object. An object has several attributes. A name, for example, is server. It's the host name usually in that case. It receives an object type. So is it a server, is it a printer, is it a person, a license, whatever. We have some users who have airplanes or stage equipment as objects. And of course these objects are all related to one another in some way. There is an administrator taking care of the system. A host is placed in some kind of rack, and on top of that there are so many other attributes that we can use, so properties in the end that can be defined. Let's look at a use case, this new interface that we have built over the last few months. So the situation was quite clear and boring, I'd say, because all of you have already used that, which is Checkmk, with various hosts and services that are being monitored. In addition, it is quite interesting to see that there is a hardware and software inventory plugin that is being rolled out simultaneously, so you get the information about the devices itself, and you can aggregate that information in Checkmk directly. And we're going to look at that in a minute. You can work with one or several sites, it doesn't really matter. And then you have the normal everyday monitoring and you get this to work. So that's our situation, but this is our new case. Let's assume we do not have a CMDB active and we want to introduce one. We decide to take i-doit Pro. There are two add-ons you need to install, which is the Checkmk 2 plugin and the API add-on for i-doit, so they can automatically communicate. We're going to install that. I mean, you know how installation works, so I'm not going to show you. But what we see is that everything is still empty, or pretty much empty. And from this starting point and with the target we have, we deduct our target, which is getting data from Checkmk, aggregate it, and add information to it. So that's one use case we focused on while we developed this. There are many others, and maybe there are questions later concerning other possible use cases, and I can talk about that. So, you see, I am going to open my terminal and show you how it all works. I have a command line tool on my system. It's called i-doit CMK. And this gives me the possibility to connect these two worlds of i-doit and Checkmk. It offers me several options of what I can do. In the end, it's only working with the APIs by Checkmk, which is in this case the i-doit API and the Checkmk Web API and the Live Status API, and that they cooperate beautifully. I have several options here. For example, I've got two main commands which are push and pull. This is from the view of i-doit. So either I push data from i-doit into Checkmk, or I pull it out of Checkmk to i-doit, and we're going to look at this pulling in a second. Then there are many minor commands, auxiliary commands, and some of them are quite important, others are not, like the i-doit CMK init that we can see here. I've already done that. What we could have a look at is status, whether my network's on. This looks very nice. I can work. Sounds great. But what we're going to do now, I'm going to take a step back into my presentation, actually into CheckMK, and see what my status is. This is all made up data. It's a test environment we created. For example, we have a little virtual machine running, and the agent is rolled out on that. There's the inventory data being collected. When we saw that, and that's the feature you implemented relatively recently, we thought this is a source of data we should really tap into, and this made us create this interface in the way we did. So we see a lot of information about the network configuration, about the system itself. There's a serial number, for example. Is there a name for the device? How much RAM is in there? How many CPU cores are running on it? And the storage is mentioned, the OS that's installed, and so on. So lots of data that deliver a good starting point for IT documentation. The data, like entering the data yourself, especially manually, nobody likes that, right? But on the i-doit page, it's still quite empty. Those who haven't seen it yet, this is i-doit. So when you started it and logged in, you see these object types. So where is what? And the different devices, for example, here are the servers. There's nothing, but I want to change that. Ideally, I want to also add some more information. So what I've chosen was the JDisk test server that I picked. I want to put that into the inventory. And I will use the command line to check that. I want to get the information that can be used by CheckMK. So it found quite a bit of information. Maybe it's not the right device. Sorry, typo. Happens when you're on stage. This looks more like it. Let's go to the top. There's a link to the device. It looks a bit cryptical, but in the end there's the inventory, that's the most important part. And that all came from the CheckMK web API. There's lots of information, and it's really nice that the API wants to communicate with us so much. We can import this, which I'm going to do by changing fetch host to pull. So I'm pulling the data from CheckMK into my i-doit. After checking a few things, we want to request quite a bit of data simultaneously. Of course, you want to make sure that data matches, because sometimes there could be data in i-doit already, and this data needs to be possibly updated. So here he's telling me that he doesn't want to update a new device, but he wants to create a new device, and whether I want to proceed, I will say yes. Let's see what he does. Here is an overview that he created a new object. The object ID is always given out. Here ours 27001. We have 4 CPU sockets on the device with 1 core each, so says CheckMK. There's some RAM, disk space, an OS, we have an IP configuration. In i-doit, I even found a matching network that I had set up before. Otherwise, it would have created a network with it as well. And we see quite a few other things as well that we can now look at in i-doit. So I move to i-doit, I refresh my page, look into my list of servers, and suddenly I can see a new server that was created. I think I have to zoom in a little for the people in the back. Please nod if you can see it, or if you can see it. Okay. Great, so this is what an object looks like in i-doit. And what you see here is an overview page with lots of aggregated information. You can configure what really matters to you. In the end, you define on the left side the categories. They set out which data should be categorized. I mean, there is lots of categories and attributes that can be filled with Checkmk, but you can just take them out of your view. I picked a subset that's important to me, and I can see what the interface has imported for me. I can click through several items, CPU, drive, I can see 70 gigabytes. Maybe the graphics card, IP configuration. Here at network, I've got my network ports that I could now connect to with further information. I see the operating system, in this case the Windows 2016 system. And what do I have at model? Checkmk has identified a frame, which is important nicely, and some other things. For example, I've got the contact assignment. And as the name says, I have contacts that are assigned to the system. So these groups that are responsible for Checkmk notifications. So this could be or is a group of people that is responsible for the monitoring. I could add people or add organizations. Like I have a colleague who I can enter here and give him the role of administrator, and I made my first addition that will help me with IT documentation. I know now who is administrating this device, so I have an email address and a phone number and can contact that person if there is a problem. I can also jump back to the Checkmk through this category. I'm right back on the device. I can look at further checks, but I can also, maybe you can see here, the symbol. I can also get the live status data. That's another category. And there's a yes. I can check here and I can see how these checks went. There's a little problem, as I can see, but in the end this looks fine. So I have a direct comparison because when I go back here I have the CMDB status and I have defined that this device is in operation. It's supposed to be in operation, and Checkmk confirms when I can refresh that it is actually in operation. What else can I do here? For example, let's say this is not a virtual machine, but a proper physical system, and I want to place it somewhere. I have created a rack in which I can place it. I want to place it somewhere in the middle where it probably belongs, or hopefully belongs. I save it, and then at location view, I can have a live view of the device. So here in this rack, I can see that it was placed. I can also access the rack, and there's a visualization of the entire rack. And in this very empty rack, I have my server. Quite lonely. Going back to my server, I mean, there's so much more information I can add. As I mentioned, you could give me the information, when did I buy it, where did I buy it, all kinds of information I can enter. This is something that actually gives me a proper added value. I can also add a contract. I think I did add one at some point, and so I can see directly, yes, this device does have an SLA, 8 times 5 times 4, it's a bit expensive, but I do get aggregate data that I can then pack into reports and process it further. That's my little example I wanted to give you. Did I miss something? Well, I mean, of course I can add passwords, go directly onto the device, but in the end it's always the same cycle. I go into the device, edit my information, and therefore add information. These are my backup slides in case things would go wrong, but everything did work. So we go to my next slide. There are many other features that this interface offers. The first thing is, and this is what we also wanted to do with our original interface, is that all the data from i-doit can make a way to configuration for Checkmk. Because if you go in the other way around, you have i-doit on your system and you want to add the monitoring to Checkmk, then this gives you the opportunity to start with a good subset. We would also go as far as to use the push. I mentioned it before, but let me show you what the push gives you in terms of supporting you. For example, it gives you different options. For example, the changes I want to implement, I can activate them directly. If I'm courageous, I can also activate foreign changes. I can add sites based on the location. There are different options for that. The house tags from i-doit, they can be documented. They can also be synchronized next to the agents and times and folders and everything. You can synchronize them back through such a push of pushing like all the hosts. I can do it with one host or various hosts. For example, I can go by ID, by title, by type, and also have wildcard opportunities. So quite a few features here. So also the second use case I just showed you. In i-doit I have many other data fields that I can use. Let's look at those. Here we can see it. The configuration can be set for a Checkmk. I want to say I want to export it. My host name is the same as the object title, but I could, of course, enter my own information, give it an alias. So the most important Vato installation steps can be performed here, but we don't want to go all the way. We don't want to let the entire Checkmk configuration work in this tool. I mean, we'll stop at rule sets, I suppose, and say this is something you better do in Checkmk. But if I mean, simply said, if you want to take the documentation as it is and get the most important information and want to push it over to Checkmk, then this is a nice way to add some extra information.
Gut, nein, soweit wollte ich noch nicht. Gut, was wir dann eben noch haben, dass
what
man
we also have is that within i-doit there are a few buttons to execute that through the GUI, but the nice thing about the interface is that it should be working in the background, standalone, and permanently work for you, perhaps per cron that you run it regularly, so you have a high degree of automation. You can go as far as to use further plugins that as soon as you change something in i-doit, it triggers an event, and then that can trigger the tool to push it directly to Checkmk. Like you perform live status or do checks for the live API, and you can then directly have this data being taken over into i-doit. And not just initially, like I showed you now, for this one host, but I can do that permanently. And you use the host name. The unique ID in Checkmk is the host name, and on i-doit's page you can choose it. Should it be the object title, maybe a FQDN that's predefined, or whatever that's defined. And this matching leads to an object that can be refreshed over and over and updated. So what was important for us with this interface? Why did we rework it? We used to use SSH and copy functions and wrote the Vato configuration that way, which isn't good because there are very stable APIs on top of i-doit and also on the Checkmk side, so it's much better to use these APIs. They work quite well. You've seen it live now. Quite a few bits of data were requested, can be compared. In large environments, of course, it takes a bit longer, but with this filter options, you can quite quickly get the information you want while having it run in the background. So programs to run in the background usually don't need to be that quick. So this is pretty much it. I think I have 2 minutes, so this is my conclusion. We can use the data from Checkmk to put it into a larger context. For example, in my CMDB, I have an IT documentation and have many other bits of communication or information that can come from the service desk, for example. Like there is an RT or something, or another tool giving me more information about the devices that are running or not running because a ticket was sent. I only need to maintain my data in one location. Of course, you don't want redundancy in this case. Of course, in the context of a documentation, this is even more tedious. I'm always, I can always see the difference between the what is situation in comparison to the what should be status, and I can easily compare those two. And with i-doit, we basically take a step further, or we go a step further than Checkmk, I would say. I mean, Checkmk is a very complete tool, but we want to have, we want to add a little added value. So, for example, I can clarify questions: why am I host and services running? What business processes are behind it? I can define clear roles, so not only who gets an information if a device fails, but who did I buy it from, with whom have I got a maintenance contract, who do I contact when there's a problem, and who is actually using it. What I did not show you was that you can also have an overview over licensing costs. I mean, I started an operating system, or I had an operating system on my machine, and of course there are costs, and I can i-doit have take a look at this cost. As I can monitor also locations, I can get information on rooms, buildings, workplaces, server rooms, storage rooms where maybe there are switches unused, maybe even into the floor tanks or patch cable sockets in the wall. And you can also work with free text documentation and define installation text, or I can set a link. Where do I get further information? How do I maintain this device? And with certain add-ons you can be triggered. Hey, please maintain me, it's the first of the month. And also something that is required by now, the emergency management and the ISMS systems, so EC 27001, if you've heard that and are afraid of it. Yeah, I think I finished on time, so this is a little bit of information. There is lots of information on our website. We do have a knowledge base about i-doit to the add-ons. We have a community, which is a forum, where you can discuss with others. Our support can support you on help.idoit.com. We have a lot of YouTube videos online because we made quite a few webinars also about our interface. If you want to check that out, please check out our YouTube channel. And now I can just ask you and encourage you to try our interface with i-doit with the Checkmk 2 add-on. You can use it, or you can just download our open source version of i-doit. Thank you very much, and I think there's little time for questions. Hello, yes. So, a few questions. So, let's go to the 30 days free test version. What's the license version? Is it a host-based license? The Pro version is based on the objects. There's a yearly subscription. We have object packages starting with 2,000 objects. The most common one is 5,000 objects. So, roughly everything in i-doit is an object, so if you only want to look at the active components that you want to document, you need about 5 or 10 extra objects. So when you say I want to have all the software documented, then there's always a new object for each of them. The cable connections, every cable can become an object. But with 5,000 objects, most people can handle that nicely. Second question is, what's your relationship with Kettner? I'm asking as an enterprise. So when you're not a partner and I'm going into this, then that's the next release. Maybe the interface won't work anymore. Maybe for 1 or 2 months I cannot really continue working. How do you make sure that this will work? Well, that is a reasonable question, of course. Matthias? Would you like to say something? No, I don't want to say anything about that. Well, like company policy is not really my forte. My colleague tomorrow maybe can tell you more about it, but I can tell you that we are cooperating ever more closely. We have talked a lot. We've had this interface for a long time with Checkmk. We've known each other, like not very on a personal level, but we do cooperate nicely, and I don't see many big problems for the future. I think the future is bright. So, final question, we've seen the hardware thing. Is there an option probably on the horizon that I can have a measurement point data bank, like intervals or who is being alarmed, that maybe I can have these shown somewhere, and then I can look at them and export them, maybe like have a Bajira ticket that I have to implement a certain measurement point. And so maybe I can see who set this measurement point when. Well, there are many categories and object types and attributes, and there are a few that go into that dimension with the maintenance or planning a certain status, how it's supposed to be. But you can actually define your own fields in i-doit. It's a very flexible tool. So if you want to have a point, I want to have measurement points, then I'm just going to build my own category with my own attribute, and I can just set it. Right now this is not being requested automatically or stored automatically. What we do have is a logbook, a i-doit logbook that covers changes. So I can always look at how a device, for example, changed over time in Checkmk and how this will affect or has affected documentation. But I think there will be a little gap. Maybe we should sit down and decide what's important, because I mean, we are interested in making new features happen. So right now there is no option for this. No, there isn't. Any other questions?
You good if I do this in English?
No problem, yeah.
Okay, great.
Please
I love the integration and the progress you've made. Your previous comment was around the ability to create custom fields, custom categories.
Yeah.
You, at the moment, offer no way to map those onto custom attributes in Checkmk at all. So that correlation of customized fields in i-doit, how do we map those into Checkmk?
It's currently not implemented yet, but it's a good idea, of course, yeah. Muss ich das auf Deutsch übersetzen? Nein, oder?
Nee, wir haben ja unsere...
Geht ja nicht. Naja.
Ja, ich glaub, wir müssen auf jeden Fall mal einen großen Applaus für die Kollegen da in der Box dann irgendwie geben, weil die machen echt einen guten Job wahrscheinlich, oder?
Ja.
Okay, die nächste Frage.
Gerade eben bei dem
So,
Sync
with
der
the
Contact Groups habe ich gesehen, dass ihr
sync of the contact groups,
synkt.
I see that you sync the host contact groups. So if you have the challenge that the host contact group is not responsible for the application running on it, is there a possibility to have all the check contact groups and have them synced?
Wenn man sie über die API auslesen kann,
If you
dann
can read them out of the API, then yes.
Ich muss da leider im Konjunktiv sprechen, weil ich da nicht so
I
tief in der Materie
cannot give you a
bin, dass ich sagen kann,
definitive
ja, das
answer
geht
on
auf
this. I
Box.
cannot tell you that it definitely works out of the box.
Ja, ich denke mal schon,
In
die
theory,
API
I'd say
checken kann,
yes. If the API
das
gives
kein
you
großes Problem sein.
this data, then yes, it should be able to be. You should be able to be synchronizing it.
Gut, weitere Fragen? Doch, da ist noch eine.
I saw on one screen that you had a list of services related to the hosts, right? So could you eventually have a relationship between a service and some text or some procedure to undertake when a service has a problem or something like that?
I'm not quite sure if I understood what you meant.
If you have a list of services for hosts, right? And then can you match one service in this list with some object that would describe what to do in case there was a problem with the service?
No, I see. No, it's currently not possible. No.
Okay, thanks.
Noch jemand? Okay.
Okay, gut.
Gut, dann danke ich dir.
Ja, danke schön.
So I thank you. Thank you very much.